I want to tell you a story that's been on my heart today and for the last few days, probably for pretty obvious reasons. It's about when I saw hunger stalk children in Yemen and how that experience of seeing that up close affected me, and I guess what it's been making me think about now, and about how we can act when we are feeling overwhelmed and brokenhearted at the state of the world. Yemen has had it pretty rough. And like many places, we often forget, right? It comes in and out of consciousness. And I was in Cairo doing special projects after the Arab Spring. And I started to see news bulletins, reports, press releases, just indicating there was an uptick in hunger-related disease, an uptick in calls for aid, and at the same time, greater political instability. And I'm always looking as a filmmaker, as a journalist, for patterns, right? It's not just the big events. You're looking for where are things starting to emerge that we need to notice, because that gives us power and agency. And I feel that it is my job to spot those and try to bring them to people. And in this case, I became aware that there was a great hunger crisis looming. Now, the first challenge is that people want the crisis to be major before they spend a bunch of money, and it cost a lot to safely do a trip to Yemen. So, my bosses wanted it to look like the images they had in their head from Live Aid in the 80s. And that is a very human impulse, right? We do this in corporations, in NGOs, we do this on sports teams, we do this in families. We wait until the crisis has gone kablooey rather than going to see what's happening while we still have time to nip it in the bud. However, in this case, I had an amazing commissioning editor who saw a couple of the pictures that I'd sent them and who understood the power of going while we could say, look, there's something that can be done here. Will the world do it? And they sent us. And I've covered a lot of difficult things. But there is something horribly painful about seeing children, 1-year-olds who weigh as much as newborns, suffering to the point where you can't even feed them normally because they're so ill. This little baby that I wanted to hold out in the countryside, and one of the field nurses having to say to me no, be careful. And I didn't understand why, but it's because she was so fragile that the germs I had on me, just normal germs, could have killed her. And we met this mother, Jamila, who was talking about how sad she was that her son, who was skin and bones, might die, right? She was like, I'll do anything to save him. And that was one thing that was remarkable. Out in the countryside particularly, a place of political instability, great conservatism. Poverty is shameful, so you don't want to show it off if you can't afford to feed your kids. And women are very retiring, right? This is full niqab territory. And these women were putting their children up in front of our camera, hoping that showing them off would somehow get them help, would somehow draw the world's attention to save their kids. Bravery. That is bravery. These are women who had made the long walk to the only clinic that did have potential help to try and save their kids. And then they were putting them up, going against everything they had known before. You could call it desperation. I call it bravery. We went back to Jamila's home and met her husband and met her mother. And there we discovered that 2 of her older children had already died from hunger-related disease. How do you live with that, right? How do you go on? And I think we often other ourselves from pain because we think we can't be with people in that amount of pain. But parents are parents, children are children. We can be with people in that pain. And the strength that somebody holds in that to move forward and try to save what they have left, which was this one little boy, it's remarkable. What made me angry and shocked, aside from the sort of Cassandra complex that the aid community, the international community, people had been being told this was going on, and yet we were waiting and waiting and waiting until it got bad enough to do something. What really shocked me was that we could drive to a nearby village and go into a market where there was fresh fruit and produce for sale. Right? Children were starving to death, and this was a man-made problem, a failure of politics, of commerce, of humanity. It was a failure to act. It was a failure to make the right decisions in the right way, in the right amount of time. And what I learned was that actually most famines, most hunger, and not just in the world, but probably in your town, comes from that. And it may not look as extreme as what I saw up close or what you see on the news or what I experienced when I was in Hagerstown, Maryland, where people were hungry and Mama D was feeding them. There's some more on my LinkedIn about that if you want to check it out. But it is usually about a failure to act as a community, local or international, to help. And I think about those children and those moms today. They're still kids, right? They're teenagers now. The moms, I hope, are doing well. The kids, I hope, are doing well. But hunger leaves a mark on their development, physical and mental, psychological. And those scars don't go away. And yet, people continue. The resilience is humbling, right? Humbling. That's my word. And we can do better as people. I thought of the doctor we met at one of the hospitals who was so lovely and patient and kind. And then Cookie, who, by the way, was the one who'd come with me to Yemen, said, "But you seem angry." And he finally said, "Yes, I am angry. I'm angry because this doesn't have to happen." And in these times when we often feel overwhelmed by what is going on. Like, we didn't cure hunger in Yemen or anywhere else in the world by doing that film. And I think we did a good thing. We brought in some money. We showed respect to those people. It was a good thing to do. It taught me a lot about what this looks like now. And feeling this pain in my heart when I think of how children do not deserve to starve, I am reminded that all we can do is whatever is in front of us. Whatever you have that is your thing you can do, right? Are you a journalist? Are you someone who can donate money? Are you someone, and if you can't, like, it doesn't, like, maybe you aren't going to go to Yemen. Maybe you're going to volunteer at your local food bank. Maybe you are going to spot a problem compassionately ahead of time where you work. Maybe you are going to be a better leader, right? So maybe you will avoid catastrophe. Perhaps you will put aside blame when catastrophe strikes, because the time for blame is not when there is disaster. That is another lesson of famine, right? The time for blame is the postmortem. And the postmortem is never happening in a war zone or a disaster zone. I'll tell you that much. You know, that is, and sometimes people get themselves tied up in knots over this, geopolitically, corporately, you know, again, personally, but but how are we going to solve the problem if we can't assign? Trust me, it's not there. That is not where the problem is going to get solved. How do we solve this problem? Do it. Do it. Are you the person to do it? Can you help find the person? What role can you play? Move forward. For me, we were in the hotel in Sana'a, and which is a beautiful city, by the way, amazing. And we were at a beautiful hotel with horrible internet, and it was almost Ramadan, the holy month of Ramadan. And we had an amazing film that was going to lead Newsnight because it was very powerful, right? I delivered. That's the other thing you got to do when people take a chance on you, deliver, right? I said, come on, give me a shot. And we were leading the 6 o'clock news, and we were leading Newsnight. And we delivered. But we weren't going to deliver if I couldn't send the film. And so I problem solved the crap out of that. I ended up taking the entire internet of that entire hotel and plugging it in to our little router that we had made, and we used it to send our films in time. Relationship building with the hotel, a little bit of bull in a china shop behavior. Relationships I already had with techie people in London. The amazing Tony Jolliffe, our shoot edit, and just wonderful human extraordinaire. And we got it there. I mean, that was also after, I don't know if I should tell people this one. There was a ride around Sana'a that I had to go do to a facilities house, and there was a gunfight in the middle of town. But like, none of that mattered because I knew what my mission was. My mission was to get that on air. And I was going to get it on air, and I did. Did it solve the problem? No. Did I do my part? Yes. Do your part. Be of service. Do not let the fact that you cannot be of service to solve the biggest problem ever stop you. Be of service where you can. Be of service to something right in front of you. I don't know, a lot of lessons from that. Because when you are brokenhearted, and there are so many ways to be brokenhearted, and it is right to be brokenhearted when confronted with the suffering of the innocent or the losses we cannot replace or feel we cannot endure. The only thing that we can do is to take action, be of service, and move forward. Brokenhearted with you guys.